Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of the Carvel Community Meeting. If you are watching this from home, we encourage you to come join us live. We meet today every Thursday at 10:30 a.m. Pacific time, but after this meeting, we're changing some things up. So keep watching and I'll let you know what that means. It's a great opportunity for you to come and listen in on what the maintainers are working on. Give feedback on what they're working on, ask questions. If you have any feature requests or you need help with something, you can come and just get that live help from the maintainers and other members of the community. If you do have something you wish to discuss, and then anybody that's on this call today, make sure you add that down below in the discussion topic section, and we will get to it towards the end of the meeting. If you are unable to find us or unable to join us in these meetings, but you still want to reach out to us, you can find us in the Carvel channel within the Kubernetes Slack workspace. You can email us. You can obviously find us in GitHub within any of our project repos, and you can find us on Twitter at Carvel_dev. And a reminder that at any point you are interacting with us or any members of the community, we ask that you please read and abide by our code of conduct. And this can be found in any of our project repos. Today's date is July 7th, 2022, as listed here in the agenda. If you are using any of the Carvel tools, we want to know more about how you're using it. So we created a pinned issue that allows you to provide those details for us. You can input those, the comments, or add a comment, sorry, I'm just muting some folks because there's some feedback I'm getting. We just ask that you provide details within a comment to this pinned issue on your use case with any of the Carvel tools, and optionally add a logo of your company, and we will get it added to the adopters file here. It's a really great way for you to share what you're working on with the maintainers so they can better understand and help with the development of the tools, as well as sharing your knowledge on how you use the tools with the community, and it helps them learn how they can also use the tools as well. So we would really appreciate it if you added that comment in there and gave us a little bit more information. And optionally, for those that are on the call today, make sure you add your name and the company or organization you are representing here in the attendees list. Moving on to announcements. For content, we don't have anything for this week, but we did post 2 blog posts last week, so be sure to give those a look. Next week, we will be publishing a blog, Setup Cap Deploy with OIDC, GitHub, and GKE with GKE and AWS by Yash Sethya. So stay tuned for that when it gets published next week. And if you have anything you want to share with the community in the form of a blog post or video, or workshop, tutorial, whatever, we would love for you to participate in this content sharing process that we've been using for the last few months. It's not limited to the maintainers. So we've created a sign-up sheet here. And what you do is just add your name, the topic you want to cover, and how you're going to be sharing that topic. And if you want us to tag you in Twitter when we post it on Twitter, you can add your Twitter handle. We will also share it in the community meeting, and we will share on Slack and do all sorts of other promotion with that. And as a thank you, we will send you a t-shirt or an alternate swag item of your choice. If you don't like t-shirts, we have other options to choose from. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. Okay, moving on to releases. We got 2 releases here, kapp-controller and vendor. So
yeah, this is just for kapp-controller, as it was reported yesterday that we had a little problem with trusting CA certificates when package repository gets reconciled. This was a recent feature when we added in 38, I think, or maybe 37, I forget. Anyway, the intent there was both package repositories and app CRs follow the same procedure. And for package repositories, it deviated from actually executing a sidecar. So this small fix corrects that. Most people would not even notice, since most people don't use custom proxies and CA certificates, but for the environment who do use it, this might be useful.
Great, thanks, Dimitri. Any questions on that? All right, moving on to vendor.
It's me again. This was some carryover from a previous release. We were investigating why vendor and Helm was not playing nice when it's configured through ASDF package manager. And turns out that ASDF package manager, for whatever reason, needs to have access to the home directory as configured through the home environment variable, even though it does all kind of paths rewriting. So in theory, it should need it, but for whatever reason, it needs it. So this is an enhancement to make vendor work with ASDF better.
Cool, good catch. Any questions on that? All right, thank you so much, Dimitri. Moving on to announcements, what I mentioned earlier in this
Nancy,
meeting. Yes.
sorry to jump in, but we also have one other release that is imminent, I believe, the secretgen-controller. Neil, do you want to speak to that one?
Sure, yeah, it'll be out some point today. That release will provide support for ARM64 architectures, so you can deploy your secretgen-controller on ARM64. If you use an M1 Mac, for example, that will be on that architecture. And that release will also be publishing package CR and package metadata CR as part of the release artifacts. So you no longer need to write your own to deploy secretgen in just like some default states. The only thing you will need to create is a package install, but the package definition and the metadata will be released by our team from now on as part of that as part of the release.
Sweet, thanks, Neil. Any questions on that? Okay, once it's released, I'll make sure to tweet it out, add it to Slack, so you have all the release notes to that as well. All right, now moving on to the item I mentioned earlier in the meeting. So we were thinking about changing the day and the time and whatnot for this community meeting to better accommodate our global community, our CAP team that's primarily based in India, and also just thinking about maybe just a better time during the week in general. We had posted this in Slack to try and get feedback, and Scott Rosenberg, one of our awesome community members, I'm going to say community managers, he might as well be a manager of community. He suggested Wednesdays instead of Thursdays. So we are now going to be moving this community meeting to Wednesdays at 9 a.m. Pacific time, every second and fourth Wednesday. And we won't be meeting next week, which would technically be the second Wednesday. Just because we're meeting today. So we will reconvene on the fourth Wednesday of the month. Now, if anybody has any concerns on that now, let me know and we can try to work something else out. But otherwise, that's what we're moving to. Any questions? Concerns? Okay. Moving on to status updates. Project roadmap. Anything updated here?
Nothing was updated here, but this is a good reminder that Rainu and I should probably provide some updates here. Well, we'll have that ready for the next community meeting. Unless there's anything you want to share right now, Rainu.
Yeah, I did add the package author improvements that we are working on. So hopefully July end or early August is when we are hoping to get something out there.
Awesome. Thanks, Renu. Okay. Now, as outside of the project roadmap, some stuff that the team is working on. Kapp-controller, adding some version constraints to packaging API.
Sure, and I dropped this into the discussion, I don't know how to say. This is both something that's being worked on and a discussion topic. So I'm happy to come back to it in a few minutes or discuss it now since it's already up.
Let's just discuss it now.
Okay, hooray. So basically, version stink, we should never write new software ever again, but barring that solution, you might want to say, hey, this will only work up to Kubernetes 1.23, or this will only work starting on Kubernetes 1.24, or even worse, you might have a scenario where you're like, well, if this is Kubernetes 1.16 or below, I want to use, this feature. Like I know one of the things we talked about was like pod, what was it? PSPs, pod security, whatever the last P is. And then if it's a later version of Kubernetes, I want to do something else. And so I need to have conditional logic in my templating. And you might be in that position with respect to both Kubernetes and with respect to kapp-controller itself. So hence there's this kind of like two-pronged solution. So we're saying, well, we can provide a minimum. Can you scroll down, Nancy, to the proposal part 1? Thanks. So here we're saying, shucks, maybe you want to say my minimum Kubernetes version is 1.19, and maybe you want to say my maximum is, I don't know, I gave this example, 1.23. And I think we basically said, well, look, if a package install, like you can have a package on your system, but a package install, if you make a package install that says the minimum Kubernetes is 1.25, and here you are in 2022 running Kubernetes 1.23, we're going to be like, well, you can't install that. This package has a minimum Kubernetes of 1.25 that doesn't exist yet, so you can't install it. That seems reasonable. And I maybe, as a brief question, I would love to get any temperature in the room of like, would you rather have 2 separate keys for minimum and maximum? Would you rather specify a range? Is this gonna totally miss the mark on anything that you all are dealing with today?
Will these variables be made available then within like templating?
Yeah, so that's part 2, Scott. You're genius. You are a community manager. So yeah, so this first step is about, I just don't want the install to go through. And then the second step, our very own Dennis recently, well, I guess before we move on to step 2, no further questions on step 1, Your Honor. No further questions.
I just wanted to ask this one to make sure y'all covered this. Is there Is there ever a situation we'd want to cover where there might be a very specific version within a range that that the package would want to skip?
Oh, I see. Like whatever you do, don't install me on Kubernetes 1.20.04.
Is that a kind of concern here while we're talking about being able to manage and
So
avoid a problem? Yeah.
maybe that's an argument for we should use like a range, a full range constraint rather than min max, right? Like the way I presented this here is that it's a min max versus if you go through the trouble of parsing a full range, then you can exclude some specific version.
I think the strength of the individual Kubernetes API groups and sort of the promises that we provide from the ecosystem, and as well as like the promises are weaker in the ecosystem, but from the core project, like we try not to break things that aren't broken from like an API layer, like formally. And so then like my immediate question there is somebody, a pessimistic infrastructure engineer who's like always trying to glue things together, is if I install a package that is going to break because of some Kubernetes versioning contract, that like I want to know why, right? And so then my question is like, what is the behavior of kapp when you provided a list of objects of specific API groups that are not satisfied by the cluster, right? Like I don't want to see a hollow message that says you can't install this because of some number that's arbitrary. Like that's so decoupled from the contract that's actually being broken, which is this API group is not available, or, you know, like there's like a very small subset of more esoteric things, like this annotation version has a buggy implementation in this controller, right? But that should be more of like a warning or something.
So I think I appreciate the input, Lee, and I'm trying to square that the ticket or the issue that was opened was actually about upgrade. Like basically I don't want to upgrade my Kubernetes cluster if a package won't be compatible with the new version, right? And that like things that happen, like I think famously 1.24, they just dropped a bunch of stuff on the floor and they were like, oh, were you using that? I'm sorry. Oh, so I know like we had that problem, and we were far from the only ones. There's a few things they dropped at the same time, and so the impetus for this is more around like coming back to decorate a maximum than anything else.
Hey, if to add Lilia, in a perfect world, everything is perfectly represented by individual APIs. And that I think is the ideal for where Kubernetes community wants to be. I don't think that that's the reality. Some things are represented well enough with the API versions. Other things are entirely, transparent to it, right? Especially if you get into, different, managed Kubernetes service, Kubernetes offerings and different kind of version ranges that they offer, right? So this feature does not necessarily replace a potential future feature that talks about, hey, I'd like to make some choices around, what I'm deploying based on the available API versions. But I don't think that future feature is a replacement for this feature.
Yeah, I think a great example of this is in the most recent Kubernetes release, we dropped support for auto like long-lived service account tokens because they've been deprecated for several years now. And so that automatic behavior is no longer present in a cluster after a certain version's feature gate, is changed by default, right? But that feature gate has been there for many releases. And then it's like you have this runtime failure, right? Like that's something that a package author can anticipate will likely happen for somebody, but it also may not happen for them based off of the version number, depending on how their API server is configured, right? Like they may have decided to move and then they need to install that package and they've just changed that feature gate's value. And
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
it's like you don't want to do anything that takes away the option of installing a package on such a flexible system underneath, for which the version number does not tell you about the state of all of the behavior. So like I'm supportive of warnings and empowering users with information, right? Like people should know, and package authors should be empowered to say like, hey, this probably is not going to work, and you might run into something in this very common case. But with any gate or like pre-flight check or warning or early exit linter type system, especially when it comes to infrastructure, which is just like we're gluing together these things that are so loosely coupled. Like I'm very against like anything that makes it difficult for somebody to actually do the thing that they want to do. So we should help people discover that packages might have problems, but we should be really careful about like encouraging package authors to take some absolute stance that says like this should not install with this version, right? Somebody should always have the option to override that, and the experience should be more about warnings and reasoning than outright failure.
I think that aligns generally with kapp-controllers balance of, what can a consumer do even though the author provided something, right? So for example, here might be ability for us to actually override a choice of, or not a choice, but rather override a decision that the system is making by default, right? Hey, look, ignore this version constraint thing, right? Just go ahead, trust me, it may work, right? I know my system better, kind of thing, right? And so that I would definitely +1 onto that type of functionality.
So I'm hearing that in a package install, we would then want like an override mechanism. Like if we did it this way, the escape valve would be then a package install needs to have an override.
Yeah, this does seem like something that would probably be very well abstracted within kapp itself. Like you would probably want some of these things if it's not already there in kapp, on like, it install this resource if we're matching this API version or this API server version, or if this API group is present, install this thing.
I don't think we would necessarily push it to kapp. Kapp itself doesn't know much about, kind of all kinds of logic that you may want to be doing, right? I think ultimately we'll probably end up with a combination where this information is available for you at the, mutation of your configuration layer, right? So, if you're writing your templates in Q, YTT, Helm template, et cetera, right? You can make some intelligent choices if you really want to. And then by the time it makes it to kapp, it's already been, properly combined.
Yeah, like when I look at how other tools solve this problem, like Helm with its like monolithic design allows like the runtime, like the applier piece, to share information with the templating piece, and that's kind of hard to reconcile. It's like you can have a convention where you can try to supply some standard shape values to other templating tools, and then get them to, you know.
Yeah, this actually trails into the next section that Joe has prepared here.
Great. Let's move to the next section that Joe has prepared here. Thank you.
Yeah. So like, sorry to go back to this, but from the moment that the package author tells you that you shouldn't install, if you really want to install it, then you should create your own package and override it. I don't think, I'm not 100% sure that, to be fair, I don't think this package should even exist in the cluster that it's not sanctioned for, right? Like if you say that this package can only be installed in this version of Kubernetes with this version of kapp-controller, if you do not meet these standards by the package author, this package shouldn't even exist at all in that cluster.
And
I think that if you think you know better than the package author, because that's what we're talking here, you think you know better than the package author, then you should fork that package and you should add it yourself with the restrictions that you think. But in some sense, what the package author is telling you, this works in this situation. Why would you want to install it in a different place, right? I think that sometimes I feel like that giving too much like freedom and too much knobs, this is gonna, even though it's gonna bite us in the future for sure, but it's just like, it becomes a little bit loosey here. I don't know. At least that's what I think.
That makes me wonder something else related, which is, I'm wondering what the behavior of, you have a cluster on version 1, and the packages within the range, it's allowed to be installed on version 1 of the cluster. And then a cluster admin upgrades it to cluster 2, and now the package is no longer in the range of that cluster versioning. What happens to the package resources then?
Again, like that's like a very good point, and it's a natural consequence of using Kubernetes, is that the way that we upgrade things is to provide migration paths and flags to enable and disable specific behaviors, and that there are many systems that are interacting with each other over boundaries that have various couplings. Right, like with the very specific failure mode that I'm describing, the things that broke from the last release, with service accounts tokens no longer being generated by default. Right, again, that's like a feature that people can opt into at various layers, and it can be completely enabled with the old behavior by just changing your cluster's configuration. Right, so like this is not this is an example of something that would break people's packages in a very surprising way that can only be found out at runtime. It's an example of something that a package author would likely want to help warn users and protect them from. But at the end of the day, because Kubernetes is so flexible and because upgrade paths are very dependent on which components are causing breakages, and the ability to change the behavior based off of how the cluster is configured. If you are packaging for a specific Kubernetes version and you have the hubris to say, I don't want this to install on this particular thing, you end up with a packaging system that's just going to get in people's way all of the time. With the pace of change in the core project still as it stands years in.
But it should, right? But it should stand in your way, because if I am managing a package and I'm telling you that you shouldn't install this in this particular version of Kubernetes, like I must know why, right? Or should I just allow you to install it, break it, and then come to me and tell me, oh, this is broken, and I tell you, oh yeah, because we're missing this part. Or because now this doesn't work anymore. If the package, this is causing the fact that you're giving like this ample freedom, it first of all is assuming that everybody will know everything and how all the packages that they are installing work. That's
Yeah,
the
I
assumption that
mean-
you're giving, which is not true, right?
Again, as a co-chair of cluster add-ons and someone who understands the ecosystem, like I think that what a lot of package authors think they know about the limitations of Kubernetes is very one-dimensional. And if a package author makes a mistake about something, or they say that this is a very particular situation, maybe they're a Kubernetes expert and they understand the breakage deeply. They want to prevent people from making that mistake by default. But as somebody who's been in a platform and infrastructure person gluing things together, like these sorts of gates always get in my way, and I do want the power to be able to say, yes, I really understand what I'm doing and I'm going to install this. And when I do that, there's going to be warnings from the package author all over the place, that say, hey, this is not supposed to be, installed in this situation, but you've done this,
So I do want to move on if we can. There's another section of this doc, and this was not the only thing on the agenda for this hour. I think hopefully I've captured, well, and honestly, it's a HackMD. So if you think I haven't captured, feel free. You all have edit privileges, don't you? I appreciate the discussion. Okay, so the other thing, exactly as prophesied by Scott Rosenberg, is we're going to make this information available in templating because you probably care about that. You probably have conditional logic and all kinds of terrible, gnarly things to do depending on the version. And so Dennis recently added, we're calling it downward API. It's an analogy to the Kubernetes downward API. So we're making available data that's in like the meta, like the app, meta.namespace or something. So we have our own downward API, and you can be like, I want you to bind the value from this, my own app's meta.namespace into this name that I'm providing, right? And it works in that sense very much like the Kubernetes downward API. And so then, same thing, we're offering, well, you're going to get to pick your own name that we bind the data to, but somehow we're going to make Carvel, somehow we're going to make the Kubernetes version available to you and the kapp-controller version available to you. And I don't think it barely matters, but I showed two different ways that we could do this, right? On the one, we've got like left-hand side that says source Carvel.Kubernetes version, and on the other, the left-hand side is the name of the data already, kapp-controller version, and you're just saying like, the right-hand side is barely matters what you say. You're just saying that's right. Anyways, I don't know if there's opinions or if anybody sees any implications one way or the other on that choice, or if there's other concerns again about anything we haven't considered in how we're passing things through to the templating phase.
To throw in,
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, to throw in something, this might be a good also starting point for other similar types of features, right? For example, Lee was mentioning earlier on around the access to available APIs, right? And so potentially plumbing such information into places like Helm template, YTT template, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I was just about to say one of the things that Helm does when you do a Helm apply is that it has the idea of capabilities within it, and then you can use that through the built-in capabilities.Kubernetes version. That does exist in Helm template by passing in flags, and we're doing a Helm template here. So I would wonder if, as part of this proposal, we could also add that like Helm template, for example, automatically we would pass in the Kubernetes version as this value, because that never hurts the Helm template, but that allows many Helm charts that would have issues today to work. Because some Helm charts just don't work with templating because they rely on the capabilities feature to say, am I doing something with pod secure PSA, or am I doing it with PSPs based off the version, or what version of CRD am I creating? A V1 beta 1 or a V1 pre or post 122, right? And so I think that it would be very helpful specifically in the Helm case also to have this plumbed into that specific case. I don't know if Q has that. I've never used it, and YTT having it as a data value would be the way. But yeah.
Yeah, the data value for Q as well, right? Q has no idea what Kubernetes is. This does raise an interesting question around whether this should be under the items part of the downward API versus some additional section, which may then provide ability to, you know, the version or the potentially down the line available cluster versions, right, may not be actually injected as a data value, right? Maybe it's injected in through the inner workings of, you know, Helm template, et cetera, right? So might be some more thinking to do in this area.
Yeah, and especially I liked what you had brought up, Dimitri, of down the road possibly adding like available API types and things like that, like Helm has today, where it can pull and say, yeah, you have service monitor CRDs of Prometheus, so create service monitors for this application if a specific things exists. I'm not sure it makes sense under items necessarily. I would agree with that possibly having it like cluster info or something under downward API, that would be a way of separating it out from the actual downward API strict what fields on the object am I pulling out? Because it seems different even though it's all bringing in data from outside into my cluster through kapp-controller. The use cases can be very different if I'm pulling from the AppCR or from the cluster itself.
Just for the record, the name on that key is not the source, but rather the destination, right? So it's more like, where do you shove in this data, right? But as you know, pointed out in Helm, for example, right, you might not be sending that stuff over a data value, right? So, or maybe the items should also, you know, allow you to not just set the keys, but do something else. Actually, the change that Lee linked to includes Kubernetes version and API versions as the flags on the Helm template.
Yeah, I think to Scott's point, if that information is not already available in a kapp-controller Helm template, then it seems like something that would not break anything if we added it. So.
Cool. So I think this has been super helpful feedback, and maybe we'll take one more breath on this topic, and then I know there really is other things on the agenda today.
What about, I see it at the bottom, but it was a question that I was thinking also. Kapp-controller can deploy to other clusters, management cluster to a workload cluster by passing in a kubectl. Which versions of what are we passing on?
Yeah, and I think that's part of the argument for doing this at the package install level, right? Is that you could be running some like ratty old management cluster deploying to a shiny new workload cluster. And to me, it seemed like the workload cluster is the important, right? Like this package install targeting this workload cluster, that's the important version to line up. Is that fair?
I think so, and kapp-controller version needs to be of the local version.
Right.
Of the management cluster, say. But yeah, Kubernetes should be, I can't think of a use case where you would need the management cluster version, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if this is done at the kapp layer, your API client is pointing to the cluster that you need the information about. But I agree that if you are plumbing information from the package install through the values, that you want to make sure to use an API client for the target cluster.
Great. Well, appreciate. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Scott.
Nope, that was it.
Okay, back to you, Nancy. Thanks everybody for the input.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, everyone. I'm gonna just skip over the YTT and image package, and if we have time, I'm gonna come right back to it. I just want to make sure that we get to the top discussion topic about examples or patterns for using image package and K-build in a Go CLI. So Dimitri, do you need to share your screen on that?
No, I think nothing to present specifically. I was hoping to just get a little bit more context on what's being kind of built. I think from a Slack thread, there was some discussions around kind of having a custom CLI that does some, building or maybe working with image packaging K-build. We are also at the same time are building KCTRL package init/release commands, and actually package repo init and release commands as well, right? So we're trying to kind of up level what a lot of the package authors go through, and also at the same time, as you're building your package, you probably want to iterate on the package, right? So we're thinking of the KCTRL dev command as well. So all of that stuff is in the PR state right now. We're still iterating. We actually just recently, I think it's a week or two ago, kind of gotten a little bit more clarity around like how we should partition the flow. But just kind of wanted to understand if some of this stuff is maybe overlapping in your, in your efforts. Maybe not. Maybe yes. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was my discussion item. That sounds actually like supreme overlap. So what we're getting into right now is pretty heavy consumption of, bundles or packages, depending on your verbiage choice, and custom production from inside. So for y'all who don't know, I'm at Twilio, and we're working with Carvel and some of the Tanzu stuff and playing with that internally. And we're getting to a point where custom software, custom services need to go into bundles so we can help facilitate them into clusters. And so the custom tooling from our side is, we have a handful of internal CLIs, and the idea is interacting with our infrastructure and just pretty much what you said, Dimitri, facilitating the ease of package creation. We need a little bit of help to template out the directory structure for our devs. We need a little bit of help giving them tooling to, K-build and image package push. The biggest thing that we're really interested in is, getting some testing around that as well. And so right now, most of our stuff is bash scripts because we're just at that phase, but we're starting to look at iterating on our Go CLIs. And we had one of our senior, or actually principal devs, take a look and just struggled a little bit incorporating the libraries. Image package was totally fine. K-build, we just actually had a little bit of issues with. And given the relationship we have and how helpful everyone always is, we said, hey, why don't we just talk to the folks we know? And so that's what we were curious about. And it sounds like maybe what we should be looking is this K control, if I'm saying that right, because we haven't spent too much time focusing there. But it sounds like what we actually need, and that's the point that we're at. We have other needs with this unified CLI tool I've alluded to that may work with some of our infrastructure, some of our cluster deploys. So incorporating both may make this kind of like huge mega tool for us, which would be a fun dream. But right now, the immediate issue is how do we accelerate our developers to put, their custom YAML, their custom whatever inside of a package so we can get them onto package repositories as quick as possible and, accelerate that cycle. And that's kind of where we're stumbling right now. And everything we have works, calling binaries, working out of containers, but it's just the testing and the validation is limited there, as like everyone here can probably guess. So I'm happy to expand any more or talk into any details, but it sounds like maybe first crack, taking a look at that PR you talked about would be really helpful for us and see, or helping out. We've got Anova who's very interested in working with everyone here, and we'll see if we can get some time back to help with that. But yeah, that's kind of the question, our perspective, and what we were thinking about.
Cool. Yeah, I think I was thinking maybe we can share a little bit of a demo at some point in the channel. I don't know if Reno's team, I know that there was some demos that have been shared in the team's private channel. I wasn't sure if those demos are meant to be publicly shared yet. So that would be a question for those folks. I think, you know, if you want to throw in any specific questions where you all got stuck importing things and, you know, calling out to things and whatnot, I think maybe that we could take to Slack just with concrete, you know, problems. I know that some folks import image package. We actually did have some problems with import, with how we were using Go container registry and how we're using, actually it's not even Go container, it's the Kate's credential provider. So there's some pending work on remedying that and cutting a new release. I do know K-build has not been as commonly imported in. Most folks, I think, have just delegated to the tool or just use the tool directly. We don't really have any objection to, you know, cleaning up some of the, I don't know, import, you know, objects to be used, right? So just tell us what you're trying to kind of import and where you're running into a problem, and we can try to see how to make that easier. With regards to the KCTRL or kapp-controller, I guess, sorry, it's, I don't think I'll ever forget that name. So with regards to that, I think those PRs are fairly raw in shape. So most likely, if you just, you know, check it out and try to use it locally, you'll probably run into a lot of pain. So I wonder if there is, you know, maybe a little bit of a README doc or something like that that we can prepare to, again, publicly share, to at least share out some of the current thinking and the plan. The hope was that we were going to iterate quick enough where we don't necessarily have to produce a lot of material and then just, you know, have folks check out the CLI and use it. But since we are running a little bit late with that, I think we can probably provide just some background information and whatnot.
Yeah, I think just kind of looking at that and getting an idea on the overlap of what we're trying to accomplish and seeing if we're just even headed in similar directions with it might be really helpful for the team. We're pretty slim right now with a couple folks out on leave. And so it'd be nice to accelerate very quickly using our tooling instead of ours, but maybe there's a great opportunity here for collaboration and helping with that, and just making sort of a more open tool that we can provide our input that may help other people outside as well. But it sounds, based on the way you described it, like exactly what we need or are looking for. And it's just that component. The future state of if it interacts with clusters and, you know, some of maybe the Tanzu community edition stuff could be a fun thought as well. Cluster provisioning relating into that, if they all map, whether the idea is intentionally separate tools, totally fine too. You know, that's all personal. But yeah, I'll save that PR and I'll drop it in the room. Thank you very much, Joe, for linking that. And we'll just hit you up in Slack. You know, I'm not shy there. I'm always around to bother you guys.
Cool.
Okay.
One last thing on this one, I could probably ask Rohit to share the recording of what we have done so far with you separately so that you could look at it. We will not put it in the public channel, but I think he could give it out separately. You can just look at it that way along with the PR.
Sure enough.
Okay. Thank you so much for that, Dimitri, and all who contributed to the discussion. And just so we're clear, it's K-control. But as I put in the chat, I will always cuddle with my clusters. That's a given. We have 5 minutes left, so I think we have a little bit of time to go over the updates for YTT and image package. So John, you want to take it away for what's going on with YTT?
Yeah, my pleasure, Nancy. We're continuing on with our work on validations. So we're anticipating one more rule to get implemented before we much more proactively extract user validation of the UX of our validation rules here. We're really looking for folks to be able to really use the feature as intended, which is that a lot of the kinds of validations that you would want to write ought to be easy, short, simple, and intuitive. So we want to make sure that we understand how close we are to that mark. So this one nut null is sort of the last of those. We actually even did some internal usability testing or exploratory testing and found some of our own UX improvements. We folded those in. But yeah, we'll be looking for a release of YTT of version 0.42 coming up pretty soon to include these rules in an experiment mode, plus some additional interesting contributions and bug fixes. So look for that coming up.
Awesome. Thanks, John. Any questions for John? Okay, image package. Joao, would that be you?
I can do the update for image package this week. It's fine. Okay. So we've been working in two different things. One is a continuation of what we talked last week. We're working on updating our authentication mechanism that we were using like a different library that was a fork from the Kubernetes one, but it was causing pain to our friend David. So we said, okay, we're gonna fix it. And we're going to start using the one that the authentication mechanism that comes with Go Container Registry library that we are already using. And thanks to that, we're going to drop a bunch of dependencies that kind of came with this Kubernetes library that was kind of overloaded with stuff. So we're working on that. Not sure when we'll be ready. We're grappling with some questions around what should we enable? What should be enabled by default? Should we allow you to opt in, opt out? So there are things that we're going through there. The other topic that we're working on now is allowing people to resume the copy to tars. That was one of the complaints that we have when you have like a very big bundle that you're trying to copy from a registry to a tar. Sometimes it fails and you need to copy it again. And we're trying to see if there's like any nice way that you can just, given a tar, we can just fill in the rest of the blobs that you didn't copy the first time around. So that's the things that we're working on. I think that's that. Does anybody have any questions about the image package? I believe João was very clear on what was happening. So back to you, Nancy.
Thanks, Joe. Really appreciate that update. Now, before we say goodbye, is there anything else? The last minute we are together to bring up. Well, I guess I should say I did put a discussion topic just to say, like, if anybody has any objections on us skipping next Wednesday. Speak now or forever hold your peace until the fourth Wednesday of the month. Lee's thinking, got that thinking face.
I think Lee's always thinking that's his resting thinking face. Yeah.
Always on. All right, so it sounds like we will skip the next 2 Wednesdays and start fresh with 9 a.m. Pacific time on the 4th Wednesday of July. And until then, you know where to find us. We'll be in the Kubernetes Slack workspace and the Carvel channel, on Twitter at Carvel_dev, always on our GitHub repos, and an email on our Google groups. So with that, we look forward to seeing you at our next meeting and have a wonderful day.